I'm going to start, and I hope that people stay with me. I was given such a short time frame to pack this in, and you'll hear there's a lot. You're going to have questions, and you will, and you should. And it's great because it's an exciting place to come to, and it's a privilege as a Jew. That it's the same thing I say when you're walking around Yerushalayim, your neshama comes alive when you're reconnecting like this. Consider, this is, as we said, this is the place where the Avos HaKadoshim, they came. Right? This is the place. This is originally the burial site of Adam and Chava, the first people on the planet. Avram Avinu lived a good part of his life in Chevron. You know what the Bris Ben Besarim was? The big covenant between the parts, where he offers korbanos. That and Eretz Yisrael's promised him takes place here in Chevron. Avram was grazing his sheep. Yitzchak lived most of his life in Chevron. It's huge, Chevron. Like Avram was grazing his sheep, and one of these stories the Zohar tells us is that the sheep fell in. He smelled the fragrance of Gan Eden, and he said that he desired this as the eternal resting point, not just for himself, but for Sarah and for actually in his will he left it. The Ramban brings this too on his Perush. He said that only 4 couples should be buried. And what later testimonies tell us, because people traveled here from all ages whenever they could, and many people had access to the original crypt, the original place where it's believed that that's where they're buried, and they found on the way down hundreds of later tombs. Everybody, can you imagine, in our nation, our holy nation, all desire to be buried near the Avos, the Imahos, near the portal to Gan Eden itself. So this is where the famous scene where Avram Avinu comes, and it's a field somewhere. Obviously, you have to use your imagination. Didn't look quite like this, but it's a field. And Ephron Hachiti, Ephron, from one of the 7 Canaanite nations, is here, and he's a lousy guy, and he starts his life with a mole. His name is spelled full, Ephron, with a vav in the middle. Another Kliyakar says, when he sold the Mars Machpelah, this whole area, to Avram Avinu for a fortune, it was a ripoff, and he knew it, and he was taking advantage of Avram's goodwill and his decency, and he sold it for 400 shekel kesef. 400, of course, every time you see 400, it signifies Ayin Ra, evil eye, which Ephron definitely had. And you see that actually in many places where you see the number 400, there's always an evil eye and a good eye. In the Torah and in the Tanakh too, 400 men went after David HaMelech too, good eye versus evil eye. And in this case, the Ra Ayin, Ephron, after selling for 400 shekel kesef over Lesocher, so he loses his vav and he becomes Ephron, which, do the math, in Gematria comes out to Ra Ayin, 400. The vav, 6 in Gematria, is 6 brachos, the Birkas Kohanim. Always signifies brachos. You lose your brachos when you're stingy and nasty to people. So with all of this spiritual background, Avram Avinu purchases this. He desires it. The Zohar tells the following scary story. He comes into the crypt to bury his beloved Sarah. She lived 7 years and 20 years and 100 years, perfect life. And there's a man and a woman standing at the entrance, and they say, she's not coming here. And Avram Avinu pled with him. Who are the man and the woman? Adam and Chava. And he pled with them, and he said, this is Sarah. It's a schus, it's a merit, it's a privilege to be buried next to such a righteous woman. They said, exactly our point. She's so good, we sin. We blew it for humanity. We don't want to be buried next to her for eternity. Right? So he davens for them. He placates Adam. Later he placates Chava. That's the S, the extra S. That's what they darshan this in the pasuk. And he buries Sarah. From there they bury Avram Avinu. Later, who buries Rivka? Who buries Rivka, Yemenu? No, Yaakov's back still in Haran. He wasn't there. He wasn't present when Rivka died.
Oh, his kids.
No, the Ramban says like this. Yitzchak was too old and blind at that point. He couldn't bury her. Esav hated her. The Chitim quietly at night snuck her in and they buried her. Yeah, because people were saying, "Oh, she gave birth to Esav." They didn't like Esav much. So Rivka's buried. Later, Yaakov says, "I buried Leah there." And he asks one of the most grandest funerals of all time. That he asks that they take him from Egypt, and all the kings pay their respects to Yaakov's entourage on their way to bury from Egypt. They come to Mars Machpelah and they give him this grand burial. I should also point out it wasn't just Yaakov who was buried at that point. Somebody puts up a protest. When they bring Yaakov to the entrance, Maran Sota says, a lot of you know the story, right? They bring Yaakov to the entrance, and and somebody puts up a fight. Who's putting up a fight? He's not letting them come in with the body. Esav himself. And they say, Uncle Esav, this is the brothers, yes? Uncle Esav, come on, this is our father's. He says, no, this is mine. He said, no, you sold this. Remember, you got rid of the bracha, and you sold the bechor, you sold the firstborn birthright, and there's one more burial plot there, only one more, and it's for our father, it's for Yaakov. He said, no, he stole my wife. I'm supposed to be married to Leah. He stole her for this world. He's not going to be next to her for eternity. I'm going to be buried there. At one point, somebody is impatient in the stands, in the bleachers, and he doesn't know exactly what the argument's going on, but he knows that a terrible shanda, disrespect, is happening to his grandfather. His name is Hushin Ben Dan. He steps forward. He's a very powerful guy. He steps forward and knocks Esav's head off. Esav's head, I take a little bit of, what?
Bare hands?
Yeah.
He's punched him.
Yeah. So he knocks his head off. The head, I'm taking a little literary license, the Gemara didn't quite say like this, but his head more or less rolls into Avram's lap in the Mars Machpelah. And what's pshat? They take his body and they bury it in Har Seir, way over in that direction, across from the Dead Sea. So best explanation that I know, I've heard, you can now do this if you know a better explanation, better pshat. Best explanation was, who is Esav? Esav was somebody of immense spirituality who could have been and should have been a Gadol Hador. Had he channeled his Yetzer Hara for the good, had Yitzchak and Rivka given them proper chinuch. They didn't, he wasn't. But his head, in his mind, he knew the right thing to do. We see that in our Gemara. Where do we see Esav in our Gemara? Exemplary media that Esav has. Kibud Aveim, right? He knew how to honor his father. He got away with some shtick. But he knew the right thing to do. So it was his body that tripped him up. His body had no business being in the holy place of the Mars Machpelah. His head, his mind was there, and is there for all of eternity. Where is there, and is this a place? Let me make I'm going to really try to condense this if you can believe it. I'll give you a couple bullet points. Why it's. Do I know 100% that this is the place? I want to say that. I'm fairly convinced that it is. I don't think we know anything with absolute certainty, but it's a very strong case to be made. Consider, the original city of Chevron is actually over that away. If you look, you can't really see with the trees blocking, but if you look up on the mountain when we walk out of here, you'll see an army base. It's called Tel Rumeida, up on the hill. It's an Arabic name. And that's where the original archaeological ruins exist, and they actually lined it up archaeologically with the carbon-14 dating. They actually can date it back to the period of the Avos, mid-bronze period. It's pretty stunning, right? So the original city was there, making this a great location to the east for burial. You always bury to the east because the winds blow in the other direction. So if there are bad smells coming from the cemetery, you always bury to the east. So that's one argument that this makes sense, that this is the place. Chevron, we've already said on the bus, has been long established as Chevron, and there's been continuous presence of somebody who cares about being Chevron. It's not just a random place. So that's a very strong argument. And this site has been the celebrated site. The building that you're looking at, we said on the bus, is put up almost certainly in the Second Temple period. Not clear was it Herod or not, but it's the style of Herod who built up the base of Mikdash and built the world's first artificial port city named Caesarea. He builds the fortress in the middle of the wilderness called the most visited paid site in Eretz Yisrael today, Masada, and he arguably builds the structure of the Mars Machpelah. That's the shell around. I said to the bus also that over a millennium later, Bybers, who was the head of the Mamelukes, who came and conquered Eretz Yisrael from the predecessors from Salah ad-Din's family, the Ayyubids, he then conquered this area, built this entire building up as a mosque. And this is why it's terribly confusing inside. You'll go, hey, this is Avram and Sarah. Those designations don't mean all that much. They're Muslim random buildings. That's why you'll see the calligraphy is all in Arabic. It's not a Jewish site, even though Jews are davening there and they're pouring their hearts out in tefillah to this, what's called a cenotaph. You'll see what's more or less a slab of concrete. It's a cenotaph that looks like a tomb. Inside is nothing. And Arabic calligraphy. Right, so it's a designation, and you want to give tourists something for their money, so they slept all the way here. You want them to feel that they actually davened by Leah's kever, so people feel that they did. But that's the structure upstairs. Bybers, you should make a note of the name. Bybers is the one who said Jews are not allowed here, and for about 700 years since Bybers, he was here in the 1200s. He said Jews were sneaky. We got around it, but he said Jews are not allowed here in the Mars Machpelah. The joke's on them because the building is just a building. It's a much later building. The original site, like in archaeology, you know this, that you always dig deeper when you want to go to greater antiquity. The deeper site almost certainly is beneath the ground in that corner. And if you notice, there's a whole something going on here. By this corner, there's a reason for that. Underground, we have this from testimonies from Binyamin Mitudela, who comes around the same time as the Rambam in 1166, and he describes with great detail going into the building, bribing the people he had to bribe. Going down, he says there are metal grates. Beneath the grates, there are stairs and tunnels. You walk, we'll see pictures inside of such things. You walk down the stairs, through another tunnel, more stairs, more tunnel, down, big crypt. He says 8 sections, 4 sections with 2 niches in each of the sections. That's how he describes it. And tombs galore all the way down.
He went inside?
Jews in later generations wanted to be buried near the holy Avos, Imahos, Adam and Sarah.
Rabbi, he went inside?
He went down. He went down and saw it. He saw it. We have a testimony of Rav Sachim Regensburg. We have a testimony of Rav Avadim Bar Tanura in 1488. He comes, and more or less their testimonies match up. They describe a structure that's down there. So I don't know if you're making a checklist right now, but check. This really does seem to pan out in a very reasonable way. Can a person, you've implied a question which you didn't ask, but can a person actually go into the crypt? So the Gemara in Baba Basra tells the story of a certain Rav Bana, who's an Amora, who actually is not, he has no plans to go inside the crypt, but he's just cleaning up the area and marking it clearly so that Kohanim and people who are careful to try not to contract tumas mace don't walk in any place that might be associated with the dead. So he's marking it, but inadvertently he actually enters the crypt. And he sees a stunning sight. As we said, the Avos Imahos never died. He sees Avram Avinu lying in Sarah's lap, and she's looking down at him, and they're looking at each other very lovingly. This Gemara is cited in discussion in later authorities. They discuss: are Jews allowed to express affection? Husband and wife express affection in public, right? This would indicate maybe yes, maybe no, maybe under certain circumstances. Generally, we're very machmir about such things. It's not an iser, but we're generally steer away from public display of affection. But in this case, Avram says to Rav Bana, he says, it's okay, it's fine, Bubala, come on in. I don't know if he says Bubala, but I'm assuming he did. He says, it's okay, Bubala, you can come on in. The dead don't have a Yetzer Hara. So what you're seeing is just pure affection. It's all good. So people are here, and people testify. And it all seems to pan out that this is the place. But the place upstairs is not the original place. Ari?
We're not actually going to where they were buried. Do we have to talk about this?
No. Somebody asked me on the bus. I said, no, it's not a cemetery. If we had the schus, and I don't believe we'll have the time to, but if we get on the hill over back that way, there is a proper basic pharos, a cemetery, then we tuck in our seats and say a bracha. But this is not a cemetery. Now, can we get into the crypt today? The modern story is like this. We know there's something downstairs. We know that nobody goes there, but archaeologists and Jews are kind of tenacious people. So when there's a will, there's a way. And in the early 80s, when there is an Arab-Israeli conflict, things were not exactly peaceful. But you don't have nearly the same security precautions that we had to go through. And the team of archaeologists came and they got into what's called the Yitzchak Rivka section. Again, that's just a designation of the Muslims. It doesn't mean anything. This section that's closest to the southwest is Yitzchak Rivka. Behind Rivka's kever, right, is this metal grate. They uncovered it. They started going down. They found, though, that the holes were there, but were filled with debris, and most of the people were a little bit too gesundta to be able to fit into the grate. Somebody brought his 12-year-old daughter, a girl named Michal. They lowered her down. She came up with pottery. The pottery, what do archaeologists do with pottery? They check it for organic matter, and they do what's called the Pachman Arbasre, the carbon 14 dating, to establish is it around the time period of the Avos, and it was around the period of the Avos, and everybody gulped. And there was a great commotion, and the Jews started writing articles and essays in archaeological magazines, and there was a big excitement brewing around the Mars Machpelah. Now, this is the early 80s. What politically is the status of Chevron and the Mars Machpelah in the 1980s? Some of you have come on the tours, we've talked about this before. I'll give you a hint. This guy. Who is this guy? Who's this guy? Do you remember? Modern Israeli general? Moshe Dayan. Right, Moshe Dayan, after the 6-Day War, we conquered this in the 6-Day War, right, 1967. And as a goodwill humanitarian gesture, liberals like to do these kinds of things, and he was definitely a bleeding heart liberal. He gave the keys of the Maras Machpelah to the Muslim Waqf. They have jurisdiction till today. Even though the Israelis conquered it, but he felt bad that, we feel guilty for winning the war, and so here, you guys get the keys. He did the same with
Rabbi
a little site that they call the Temple Mount. The Muslims are still in charge there until today. He also brought back all the majority of the Muslims who fled during the 6-Day War. He said, Bubba, we feel so guilty, come on back, and they did. You ever heard of the Arab-Israeli conflict? Thanks, Moshe. Anyway, that was Moshe Dayan. So Moshe Dayan gave this area to the Muslim Waqf. They were in charge here. They heard now, going back to the 1980s, they heard all the tumult, all the commotion of this 12-year-old girl, and now the discovery, and they clamped down and shut down the whole project. And to my knowledge, unless somebody snuck in there since then, I'm not aware, at least, of anybody getting back in this area. It's closed off to Jews, and therefore the tunnels and the underground is simply the stuff of written histories. But we have no ability to go there today. Maybe we will one day, and maybe sometime soon. All kinds of things are changing in our world. Keep making tshuva. And one thing I should point out: 1994. I should give a little background. Jews already in 1994, they're settling in Chevron, not just in Kiryat Arba next door, but there are Jews present around the Avraham Avinu Shul, in Beit Hadassah and other places around, and they knew a lot of tragedy, a lot of terrorist attacks, a lot of people lost people they knew, family members, friends. There was a doctor who had immigrated from America by the name of Baruch Goldstein, who had seen a lot of tragedy himself, and some people say that he snapped, other people said that he was in his right mind. The Manav Shach, either way you have it, he came in one day in the morning in what was at the time totally open. The whole area upstairs, the whole mosque upstairs was open, and therefore there were Muslim worshippers and Jewish worshippers. And he came in with armed, and he started unloading his arms and killed 27. I was getting 29. 27 Arabs before they lynched him and killed him. Okay, that's what he killed. Well, sorry, man, lived 127 years. Sorry, man, it lived. So there was that. Was he a hero? He's lionized. He's created a hero in the Khan movement. The very right wing movement. He's branded a visionary and so on, and celebrated, and they make pilgrimage to his grave. Other people, the Gedolim, certainly don't hold him to be a hero of any sort. It led to a lot of bloodshed afterwards, and who knows the ramifications. It's not what Jews do to bring Mashiach. But in any event, that meant that they had to redecide how do Jews come here. And what you see today is a direct result of what happened in 1994. They wound up having to divide up the area upstairs. Yitzchak and Rivka, for most of the year, belongs to the Muslims, and they access it from the other side. You may not realize it. It's this nice kind of sleepy town, kind of a ghost town feel here. On the other side of the wall is a bustling metropolis. A huge area with traffic jams and so on. We don't feel it. That's the Arabs. Right? The Jewish side, there's not much going on, not much tourism here. Sometimes a year, you come Chol HaMoed, it's pretty hopping here. But this time of year, very little, and probably during the wartime, even less. So they get that part. The rest of it, which is what we call Avram and Sarah, and then further to the north is Yaakov and Leah, that's Jews have access to. 10 days a year, the whole compound goes to the Jews, Chol HaMoed among them. 10 days of the year, the whole compound goes to the Muslims. That was the agreement. That's what we can see nowadays. One question that I just kind of threw out there, maybe some of you thought it. Sorry, I'm speaking too fast. I'm just trying to give you as much as I can in a short time. Can you go in there? Can you go into that building? What's the issue? Al Pi Halacha?
What? It's a mosque?
It's a mosque. Yeah. Are you allowed to go into a mosque?
Rav Shlomo Zalman did.
Rav Shlomo Zalman, we'll see if you come up with me at the book Gutnick Center. They have some gewaldige pictures in there of the modern day. We'll see a picture of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal coming out of the Maras Machpelah building for sure. He's not the only one. He's going on what the majority of the posts can go on, which is the Rambam who passes that Islam is not idolatrous. When they daven to Allah, they mean Hashem. Even though Allah is not, people think linguistically comes from the same root of Elohim. It's not. It's actually a formerly pagan god that they stripped of the pagan ideas and they made it into what they believe is Hashem. Rambam was not endorsing Islam. He said they're crazy and nuts, and I'm not at liberty to write about them. They're going to kill me. Otherwise, he was living in Muslim regimes. At the time, he writes about them extensively. Go read his letter he wrote to Yemenite Jews, the Iger Timan. He writes extensively, but he says it's not idolatry, and therefore you can go into a mosque. The Mishnah Berurah and other modern poskim accept that lahalacha, but not everybody does. There's a minority view. It's the Ran. You should be aware of it at least. The Ran holds that Islam is like any other religion, outright a explicitly Avodah Zarah, therefore completely forbidden to go into the mosque. And there's a minority view, among them Mitzitz Eliezer, the Sanzer Rebbe, has a Chassidus, they would not step foot in the building. So it is an issue. I would tell you, if you're not sure, I don't know how we hold. Most people hold like the Rambam, you're in good shape by doing so, but it's not necessarily an automatic thing. You have to ask these kinds of questions. So is this the building? I think a strong case can make that it is. Can Jews, is this an easy thing to get here? No. What a privilege we got here today. Again, it's the first time we think in 4 years that Derech has come, and people don't come. Israelis think, Chevron, that's the side of it's off the planet, you can't go there, it's too dangerous. The issue of Shomer P'sayim Hashem, if people come here, it's not us to make such a trek, and but you have to realize the preciousness. People came, the Dorei Dos, and we have testimonies, and I have tons of stories and legends to tell. I'll give you one. One traveler in the 1500s came through Chevron. He couldn't get to Mars Machpelah because of Biber's decree, no Jews, but he came to Chevron, and they're Yidden living in poverty and difficulty. He said the first thing a traveler must know when he comes to Chevron, Eretz Kodesh, he's immediately sat down, they wash his hands and feet, he's given a bowl of lentils to eat. They had no money, but they had lentils, right? So they gave him lentils, they gave him water to drink, and maybe some wine if they were really wealthy, and they took care of you. Today it's a thing. We don't always encourage it because it's too much of a hangout scene, but there's a thing. Anybody come during Chayei Sarah? I won't tell Rickman if you tell me. You know about Chayei Sarah?
Yeah.
So that's a thing. People come to Chevron. But you should know, very much to the credit of the modern people who are living here, they also put out quite a spread. It's a place of immense Hachnasas Orchim. Why do we associate Chevron, of all places, with Hachnasas Orchim?
Avram.
Avram Avinu. Right? His tent was open on 4 sides looking for guests. This is where he goes when he separates from Lot. He's in Chevron Eretz Kodesh. So all of these associations, as we go, as we see, as we talk, should be running through your minds. You're in a place of godless, a place that most of our ancestors will be plotting if they could be in our shoes right now. Because the Jews could not get into the building, but they came anyway, they threw them a bone, and this is the last thing I'm going to say right now, and then we're going to open daven for a little bit. They gave them a bone and they said, okay, you can go up on the side and daven by what are called the 7 steps. The 7 steps, which is, it's sloppy seconds. It's like the Western Wall relative to the Makom HaMikdash. Western Wall is not the holiest place in the world. It's as close as we can get because we're living in times of Golus, of exile. One day we want to go on top and bring korbanos. Same thing here. We can't get to the building. We get the 7 steps. Only the joke's on them. Because the building's garnished. The building doesn't matter. Follow, right? What turns out, great ironies, they set up the 7 steps. We don't see the steps. You'll see on the wall there's like a black mark that designates maybe where the 7 steps were. That's where the Jews are davening. We'll be there in a moment. But by the 7 steps, it turns out, ironically, you're actually much closer to the original grave site of Adam and Chava and Avram and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka and Yaakov and Leah than any of them, because that's almost certainly directly below the southwestern corner of where we're standing right now. So it turns out if you want proximity, that's the closest the Yid can actually get today. Who needs the building? We'll go in the building anyway. It's got a great history and some great pictures inside. Rabbi Friedman.
Just before we go, I'd like you to introduce one song that maybe we'll sing together.
Yeah, Valdik, what do you have?
So if you could introduce the song of Hamalach HaGoel, which I think everybody knows. Think people say it on a daily basis. I think there's a lot of significance connected to it. Just introduce it for a minute, and then we'll all sing it together, and then we'll go inside. Beautiful
suggestion. Great. The Malach HaGoel, by the way, is Kabbalistically very profound. It's Metatron, and it's the angel that writes down all of our merits and all of our demerits. And Yaakov, of course, who's buried right downstairs here. Yaakov blessed Ephraim and Menashe and all of his descendants. That's all of us with this great bracha. V'yidgul arov b'kerev haaretz.
And spoke about Avram and Yitzchak as well.
Right. Now, everybody's here. Everything's in the song.
Yevarech es
This is no different. We're not in a cemetery. You don't stick your tzitzit. You don't say the bracha on a cemetery. But when you're davening by a kever v'tzadik, as this is davening by a kever v'tzadik, you don't see the kever, but you don't need to. It's close enough. Because you're not davening, remember, to the tzaddik. You're davening, like anywhere in the world, only to Kadosh Baruch Hu. I asked Rav Tukachinsky, the Gesher Chaim, why do you need to come here? You daven and you should daven. Rabbi Yochanan teaches in Brachos Halavai, all my day will be just be davening and speaking to Hashem. Why come here? So one answer is that tzaddikim, on their own initiative, we're not asking them for anything, but they could be a melitz yosher. They have special zchuyos that we may lack, and they can bring our tefillas on high. Therefore, and even if you don't say any of those things, we were just talking about this, right? Balsam and I were talking about this. You know how many Yidden, for 3,000 years plus, came to this site? Picture this. This mom is chilling. How many Yidden, our ancestors, came here to pour out their hearts and tefillah to Kadosh Baruch Hu? We're going to count ourselves among them in a moment. Collect your thoughts and let's go. Stones look a lot like the coastal stones. It's called embossed, right? It's the Herodian style. Now, either Herod himself came here and built it.
It doesn't look like the culture.
It's not quite, not precise, but it's close enough. Same style. It's the same style. The question Daniel asked is, how did they build these massive stones? And I told him that we can't see today, but just on the other side in the Muslim section is what they believe is the second largest rock in Eretz Yisrael. The largest is in the Kosel. And there are many theories about how these were extracted from the ground, from rock quarries, they would find a natural opening in the rock, and they would put wood in overnight, and then they put water on the wood would expand naturally and break the rock. They would extract it. They would use pulleys. You hear what I'm saying? Like they would have right. They have this.
No way they did all these bricks.
I'm with you. So I'm on the tour. I'm the only religious guy on the tour. I have to take to keep this stupid badge. I have to take what's called Hishtalmut Morei Derech. Every year I have to take a refresher course. I'm with one of the top ranking, how they rank these things, archaeologists in Eretz Yisrael and all secular people. And he's going through this topic. We're by the coastal tunnels. In the coastal tunnels, you can see that largest rock. And he's going through every possible theory. And then, in a rare, stunning moment of honesty, he looked around to make sure he's not being recorded, but I am. And he said, but I have to be honest with you, none of these theories make any sense. And of course, I'm like in a mortal battle with myself. No, Bleiweiss, be quiet. No, down. Put your arm down. Because I'm thinking, maybe Kadosh Baruch Hu gives special siyata d'shmaya to Yidden who are building, or even people who are not Yidden who are building holy structures. They're going to lynch me on the spot if I say such a thing. But I believe, I didn't say it, but I believe that these things were given special siyata d'shmaya. How is this building still standing 2,000 years later?
That little curve right there, you see that little curve?
Right.
How did they do that curve?
Right.
Doesn't make sense.
Stunning. Well, to be fair, the other thing you could say, and I'm not going to ask your question next, but to be fair, they're Esav. Esav, remember, he took his spiritual kochos, which some say were on par, even better than Yaakov's, and he channeled it instead into physicality. He became a master of Olam Hazeh. His descendants inherited that, and you see with Roman architecture and their other Roman aqueducts and their whole irrigation system, they took his mastery and made it into a science. And that's, you can see Western technology, the whole Enlightenment, technological revolution, scientific revolution is an extension of that. That's Esav's world and his attempt to master the universe, and he did pretty good, Taka. Right, Balsam, what do you say?
Isn't it similar, bewilderment, like how did they build the pyramids in Egypt?
That's what I was thinking.
Wonders of the world, but then Jews were involved in that too.
That's what I was thinking.
We would say it's one of the wonders, but they'll never count it that because it gives Jews too much attention. What was your question?
My question is, are we allowed to really be like this war and everything when it's really not affecting the big community?
So when I think it's all about kavanah and such a thing. You're saying it's treif and they should be kissing a wall. What was originally not even, it was just a monument, some kind of a memorial to the original Mars Machpelah that was later converted into a mosque. Little pashnish to be able to kiss such a thing. But I would give it a limud schus. I would say, no, here are people who are so drawn to the kedusha of the place, to the fact that, this is the burial site of our holiest founders of our people.
Let me know when you're leaving.
Right? And therefore that's and they're channeling their devotion to Hashem. So see it in the positive light. We will continue. That also is the border between Jewish Chevron and Arab Chevron, and on the other side, one thing we can't get to is a tombstone of Avner ben Ner, who is a subject of a great story in Shmuel Aleph. You realize if I was given proper time, we had weeks to come and tour here, and I could tell you stories. You could take out our Tanakh and learn the stories where they took place. David HaMelech was king, I said, for the first 7.5 years of his monarchy. Of the 40 years that he was king of Melech Yisrael, he was in Chevron, near Kodesh. And this great story involving Avner and his tragic death in Shmuel Aleph is a story that we should take out to Mafarshim and really learn properly. Anyway, plant it in your mind. Can I have your attention for a second?
That's the
traditional gravesite. Are these really authentic gravesites? I don't know, and I doubt it. Exactly. Up on the mountain in Tel Rumeda, you might have glanced at it. On the mountain on there, they have a kever of Ruth and Yeshaya. That, in my mind, my formulation is like this. I'm not saying that those are not Ruth and Yeshaya, but I'm not saying that they are, and it makes no sense. I mean, I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Right? What are they doing in Chevron? Ruth, after all, lived off the rest of her life in Beit Lechem, and then in Yerushalayim Kodesh. The Medrash says that Batsheva was among the massive entourage sitting around Shlomo HaMelech at his inauguration, and later on when he sat with his ferocious throne, the famous kisei of Shlomo, and all the Sanhedrin, all the Gedolim, and Batsheva, his mother, was there, and it says also the pasuk, and Aim HaMelech, and the queen mother was also there. And the answer is that was Ruth. Ruth was there too, seeing her great-great-grandson in King, building the Beis HaMikdash. What's she doing over here? Makes no sense, right? So I think graves are often made up. But I can't say that for sure. And for all I know, I've been humbled in this job. I'm wrong a lot of the time. So always fact-check me. And it could be, but I doubt it. Anyway, there's all kinds of treasures here. We don't know. As we're walking here, as we go through, keep in mind, right? This is such a privilege to be able to walk here, and all the things that happen. Take away all these buildings and imagine what was life like back in the days. David HaMelech, no less, was walking here. We'll go into the building again. The building, little significance, except that so many Yidden come here and pour out their hearts and their neshamas to Hashem in tefillah. For that reason alone, there's kedusha.
I should learn Kedushin over here in that place. I want to learn Kedushin.
Doesn't mean anything.
You read the story. When this commotion got out, the Muslim Waqf, these guys who are screaming right now, they clamped down and they said, no, you can't, no access for Jews. So this was never followed up.
Right when she came back up,
do me a favor, since we're a big group, take several steps back so more people can see the picture. Mamash, Petach Gan Eden, the entrance of Gan Eden. You will not see this in Boca Raton, right? Even though they got some nice supermarkets.
No, it says the opposite.
Oh, yeah, Sarah's tent. That's in Miami, right? Okay. Yeah, so here we are. So you see the pictures. When we're done, after I finish speaking, you'll come and check this out and fact check me with what they write here. But you have a picture of, can you keep it down? So we consider it.
They smell like it.
Right? It's terrible. Anyway, this is a shtick. In recent years, they've upped the volume as a way of, it's another one of those fighting for hegemony, we're in charge kind of a things, and there's nothing anybody does about it. They just let them get away with it. Anybody remember when we were sitting on the rooftops on the Shabbos in the old city, when the church and the Muslims and the Christians were going at it? Right? You heard about this, right, Marcus? That the church bells then started ringing extra loud, so then the muezzin on top of the minaret started going even louder and louder and louder. It was like watching two kids fight in a sandbox. But really, you could see much of this, the backstory, the subtext, what we're talking about is Christians and Muslims fighting for supremacy, and now the Jews laterally get into the mix because now suddenly the Jews are sovereign. Well, that was never supposed to happen in the Muslims' mind. And what are we doing here? That's why they clamp down and give us very little access. This is what the whole structure looks like when everything is open. These doors now block us out. On the other side, you go over to what they call Yitzchak and Rivka, which we already said a few times, is just a Muslim designation. Behind Rivka, in this corner, is this little hole that's described, as I said, by many of our Gedolim, that if you can go through there, open the metal grates, unlock it, and go down, you get to the original crypt. We have many stories, many stories. Some of them, all my stories are true, some of them haven't happened yet. So, that's Rabbi Bleiweiss line. So, in one story, a man, one of the sultans, drops a golden chalice, and it falls down into the crypt. He sends a servant down, doesn't come up. Sends a second servant, doesn't come up. Third servant. Finally, they turn to the Jewish community. They said, one of yours is going to go down and get the golden chalice. He's a little afraid. He fasts, he davens. He goes down, he brings the golden chalice and returns it to him. And they said, what's your secret? He said, I can't tell you anything what I saw down there. One story. Second story, and actually a couple different versions. He never told anybody. But in this one, we know more, as follows. A woman, and most of the Yidden were living here, pashut, simple people, poor people, trying to eke out an existence, all of them Yirei Shamayim. Nobody lives in Eretz Yisrael. Until the modern era, secular Zionism is a new chapter in history, a bad chapter. We're not supposed to be in Eretz Yisrael under secular terms. We're supposed to be keeping Torah mitzvahs. The Yidden who were living in places like Chevron, they were the real deal. Right? You didn't have to have a derech institute to makarav them. They were there. So, but they had to eke out an existence, and one woman was a handmaid and a laundress to an Arab woman of nobility living in Chevron. And one day the Arab woman, they did these kinds of things randomly. They could because they were in power. She said to the Jewish woman, hey, come, I got the keys. I took the keys from my husband's his latch, and I have the keys to my people. Let's go take a look. And the Jewish woman was, she had no choice. This was her mistress. So she followed the mistress. The mistress opened the door. She said, obviously they got down there somehow, according to legend, right? She opened the door. She said, you first. The Jewish lady had no choice. She walked in first. Boom. Doors closed and locked. She's in a dark, dank crypt. And terrified, but not terrified. She closes her eyes. She davens. She suddenly feels, unmistakably, the presence of not just a woman, but it feels mamish like Safta. Mamish Bubby right there. The warmest, nicest lady with warm hands who takes her hands into her own, and she says, it's okay, everything's fine, Hashem heard your tefillahs. She said, this older lady said to the laundress, this Jewish woman, she said, close your eyes and follow me. The lady leads her. Now, meanwhile, upstairs, the Arab woman planning her deception, she goes to her husband, she goes to the police. She said the Jewish woman stole the keys. She must be arrested and killed for her treachery. And they go down and they have a spare set of keys. They go into the crypt. No Jewish woman is to be found. And the Arab woman is now looking pretty bad. And she says, but I'm telling you, I swear she was here. She stole the keys. She's inside. Nowhere to be found. They go to the Jewish woman's home. They find her. She's sitting over a big vat where she does her laundry. And here's the catch. The water that she's doing laundry with is boiling hot, something that we could do this kind of thing, put on the boiler, it takes 20 minutes. Back in the day, you had to sit there for a while till the water was that hot. She'd been sitting there clearly for hours. And they said, you stole the key. And the woman said, I don't know what you're talking about. Look, feel the water. It's hot. I've been here. Couldn't have been here otherwise. Her story checks out. They arrest the Arab woman. It doesn't end well for her. That's the story. Later that day, the Jews followed with anticipation what happened. Usually these stories did not end well. They go to the Jewish lady. They said, what? She said, I can't tell you entirely. But she told them her story. She said, this wonderful woman, I felt like it was my grandmother. Obviously it was Sari Meno. She took me by the hand. She closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I opened my eyes. She let go of my hand. She was no longer there. And I'm sitting over the laundry. It's hot. Hashem saved me. I can't tell you how this happened. Now, are these stories real? Did it really happen to Sari Meno? We say the Abbas the Amalos, they didn't die. And they're here, and they're davening for us, and they're feeling our sorrows, and they're with us at our joys, they're dancing with us at our weddings, and they're part of our lives. And in the Yidden's imagination, let's say for argument, let's say you're overly rationalist like I am, you say, oh, come on, you don't believe that kind of nonsense. But just think, how living these ancestors, these holy tzaddikim are for the Yid and the Dori Doros, how their example, their righteousness held them through the hardest of times, and yeah, they got them to survive. So on that level alone, just the inspiration enough gave us the kochos, the spiritual fortification to be able to make it to the next step. That in itself certainly saved us. This mosque upstairs that we're walking around, is it holy? Is it significant? I made an argument that it's not so much, except for all the Yidden, for all these generations, we were not even allowed to come here, but since 1920s, and then again since the 6-Day War, Jews started coming here. And think of all the holy tefillahs the Jews were davening here. That takes on a koach all of its own. We're going to go to the area that they call Avram and Sarah right around the corner. People ask, I'll say really the less significant standing in such a place, but it's run down somewhat. But you can see once upon a time the architecture was quite stunning. The people who built this, Bybers I mentioned, was a tyrant, was the slaves of Salah ad-Din, who then overthrew them and conquered much of Eretz Yisrael. And they had money, and they had style, and they built up. And you can see much of the style is built like the old city. Look outside, you see the red and white alternate colors. See that style, the red and white, going back and forth? The pillars outside. That's called a blade. It's a classic Mamluk structure. Next time you go into the old city, go down to the Shuk, and you'll see the same style. Mamluks were here. They were slaves, and they became masters, and they were corrupt like everybody else. And they're their own historical story. But they're the ones who built this. But we don't care about any of that. You're looking beyond there. You're seeing what are cenotaphs, the slabs of concrete. These, by the way, were put in. These are old. These slabs of concrete, but all over the country. Who goes to Kiryat Tzaddikim? Around here, I'll plant the thought in your mind. You should make it a habit to do so. It's endlessly inspiring. You reconnect with Tzaddik. You feel like you know them. That's how we should feel coming away from Chevron as well. So I'll talk about the Tzaddikim in a moment. But you should have that sense of grandeur. Where the presence of greatness, not in this room, but down not far from here, a few meters underground, the original buried place, almost certainly, right? So most of the places you go around today, in the 1950s, the Israeli tourism ministry felt, hey, you can't just go to an empty cave and expect tourists to come here. It's not interesting and not exciting. So they built it up to make it seem more dynamic. And that's what explains these cement cenotaphs that are put in, and then they cover them with the parochit, and they put all the psukim and they do it up. But what was there if we were here 100 years ago was not much. You don't need much. If you're a holy Yid, you have the recollection that Adam and Chava. What do we know about Adam and Chava? Buried right downstairs. When you think of Adam Arishon, you think of first man. Okay, be better than that.
Got Aiden?
He was an epic tzaddik. He's one of the four who saw all of history. He saw us here standing today. He saw the gas chambers. He saw everything, Adam. He was a huge tzaddik. He sinned. Yeah, that's true. We all went down because of that, and we're still kind of recovering from that. We're working our way back to try to get back to Gan Eden. But Adam Arishon was a immense tzaddik, and he sinned and he reacted properly. He made tshuva. What did he do? What act of tshuva did he do? How many years? 130. The Erev Rav. Every time you see the Erev Rav, 130, that's the number. Very significant there. So that's the right way. He set the model for us. He saw a great tzaddik who had yet been born and was never going to be born. He was going to be a stillborn. He said, slice years off of my life. He gave 70 of his own years, and he should have lived 1,000. He lived 930 instead. Chava, what do you know about Chava? Adam, by the way, was the most beautiful man who ever walked the planet. Right? Same Gemara that I just quoted, Baba Bas says that. Chava was the most beautiful woman. What else do we know about her? Ein Kol Chai, she gave life to all people. Also a great figure. Great tzaddikus. We emphasized her mistake, and she blew it, no question, with the fruit. That was not an apple, that's a Christian thing. But it was either it was a wheat or grapes or fig. But esrog maybe. Right? But Chava was a great woman who had vision. She named her sons all about Hashem. Everything for Adam and Chava, they were all purely about Hashem. The world was supposed to take off and should have been connected through this great first generation. Didn't work out. The later generations declined to the point we got to the Mabul, and then later on to the Dor Flaga, where everybody was blowing it, and then in a vacuum came Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, what do you think of? What are the major things? You can't come to a place and not think at least what are the great singular qualities we associate with these tzaddikim. Who is Avram in our mind? chesed. He's the meat of chesed. Kabbalistically, we can go to town with that and have a 3-hour shiur just on that alone. What else do we know about Avram? What is it? Founder of. How did he do that? How did he found Judaism? What gave him that distinction?
He believed in one God.
He believed in one God, but you have to say more than that. He did so in the least likely circumstances, surrounded by ridiculous paganism. We all know the medrash about his father's idol shop. Ridiculous paganism, and how old was he when he found Hashem? 3 years old. He came to full maturity at 48. He really had a fully developed theology, as it were. But he was connected. Avram Avinu, do you know, figured out all of Shas? He knew God's story, he knew everything, just by looking at the stars in the sky and the trees on the leaves. He was very smart, that one. He was very righteous. He stood up against all of you. By the way, we're supposed to take a cue and be like this. When you go to a Kevin Tzadi, a piece of that should go into you. Okay, I'm not him, but I should take his model and follow it. Adam stood in a world that was evil, and he stood up to it, and he said, this is wrong, and I'm going to do the right thing against everybody's better opinion. Jews do that through history. Proper Jews say, everybody's going against the way, and they're all oversleeping. I'm coming to Shachris, for example. That's what a Yid does. I don't care what the normal everybody's doing. There's plenty of place for everybody in Gehenna. Right? Avram stood up. Do you know in his time, the Meiri, in his famous introduction to Pirkei Avos, which is a little history, he said, Avram Avinu Makarib, over half of his generation. Half his generation became monotheists in his day. Didn't last. They didn't have a Torah, didn't have a system to keep it into the generations. But that was how he touched people. Sari Mena. Right? This is supposed to be Sarah, that's Avram. Again, these are just designations, but Sari Mena, what comes to mind? Snua Haisa. Right? Remind me to tell you the story if I got in trouble with all the Reform rabbis for calling her that. But she was the epitome. She was Hine Hiba Ohel. She's in the tent. She's modest. What else is Sarah? What is he? Loyal. What do you see that? That's interesting. Certainly she was greater in Nevuah than Avram. She says, get rid of the kid, throw him out to Yishmael. Avram said, I don't know, it's my son. She says, throw him out. Avram says, Shma b'kolah, listen to her voice. She's greater than you in prophecy. Women have that. Women are closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu in that regard. Rivka's the same way. They're and as are Leah and Rachel, they call the shots in their homes. And we should listen to our wives. They have intuition. They have Bina Yasera. Sarah manifests all of those great qualities. By the Akedah. Why did she die? The Satan came and told her. So why did she die? What's the wrong shot? What's the right shot? The wrong shot that a lot of people say is she heard that finally their one son, who she finally bore after all those years, was killed, and she had a heart attack. That's the wrong shot. The right shot was the Satan told her that Avram hesitated. He hesitated for an instant, which he didn't do, but the Satan made it up as a test. And Parch Nishmasa, she died by a neshika, she died by a divine kiss. Doesn't say that because it's not a modest woman, but still that's how she died. Her body just left her soul just left her body. Yeah. It almost feels, I don't know if anybody else has the sense, but it's inadequate to just kind of taper things down into a soundbite about these giants, and we could spend days here just talking about them, but on the other hand, we can't not do something. The Avos HaKadoshim, one more thing I'll just say about Avram, we're mitzakin something for the Jewish people that we have till today. What was that, Gemara Baruch says? Tefillah. They gave us tefillah. Avram was mitzakin Shachris, Yitzchak, Mincha, Yaakov, Ma'ariv.
Can I say a quick idea?
Please.
I think that just everything that you're saying is super practical. But from a historical perspective, I want to just switch it for a second, and then obviously we're going to go back to you, to a practical, modern perspective. And I would say, if we're by the Tzion, real, imagined, whatever exactly it is, I would pose a question: if she was the first of the imahos, what character traits did she embody that we should be looking for ourselves in our own spouses? So what I would say is an actual, very, very interesting, what would seem to be a contradiction, but really I believe that it together, that's the idea of Tiferes, right? Together, it works together in the ultimate harmony. What that is that on one hand, whatever Avram told her to do, she did. Avram said, go say you're my sister. What did she think was going to happen when he said that, go say you're my sister, right? She left her family. It's clear that she did that. She did a lot of stuff because Avram was her dugma. Avram was her husband. Avram was the person that she's going to literally go to the other ends of the world for. She's literally going to get kidnapped and put into, some evil Pharaoh's house or Abimelech's house or whatever exactly it is in order to, because that's what my husband said, I'm willing to do that. But at the same time, a woman can't be the pushover. As much as she goes after her husband, she has to be what we call the Akaras Habayis, the foundation of the house. And the foundation of the house is that anchor that is able to say, hey, but this is wrong, or this is something you have to address. There's always like this big issue of like people get worried about like, I don't want my wife to be my mashgiach, right? And that's a very, very true point. You don't want your wife bossing you around.
Don't marry Rabbi Pittem.
Don't marry Rabbi Pittem. You don't want her to be your mashgiach. But at the end of the day, you want her to be your conscience to a certain extent. You want her to be like, hey, this is not the best way. That intuition that she has to say, hey, this guy's a problem, right? Or that intuition that she has to say, we should probably be considering this idea. That sort of balance is a super important thing to look for. And very often people look for one or the other, right? I know no one's going to say it over here, right? A lot of people, the type of girl they want to marry, even if they're not going to say it out loud, is the stereotypical dumb blonde, right? What's the idea of the stereotypical dumb blonde? Sure, she's pretty, fantastic. Sarah is a gorgeous woman. Besides the fact that she's pretty, she's dumb, right? It's not just that you want a blonde, you want someone that's going to listen to you. So you have to be taller, you have to be older, you have to be smarter, you have to be the dominant one in the relationship because you don't have the confidence yourself to be able to listen to someone else's perspective. And that's a super unhealthy way to go into marriage. You have to be able to find a girl that's going to have this balance of, on one hand, she understands, the different roles within a relationship. Maybe we can't be speaking about them. We could over here right now. We could, right? There's different roles in a relationship. And if you think that you're going to be the one to birth the children, that's not going to happen, right? She has her roles, you have your roles, and that has to work properly. And there's a structure to how that works. And therefore, sure, she's going to go to the other ends of the world to try to help her husband and do whatever it is. But she still has to be that anchor. She still has to be that moral conscience. She still has to be able to stand her ground and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, or maybe this is a problem. And we really have to find that balance.
Precedent, of course, is Adam and Chava. You go back to Adam and Chava. She is an Ezer Kenegdo, which embodies the quality that Rabbi Friedman just described beautifully. On the other side, we're designated as Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak Avinu, what do you say? What's your association? He's the least known of all of them. You look at Parshas Toldos, at the end of Chais, at the end of Vayera, he's the Keda, but he doesn't figure so prominently, not nearly as much as Avram, and not nearly as much. Yaakov gets how many Parshas just about him alone, right? So Yitzchak is the most mysterious. What else do we know? What's that? He lived the longest, 180 years, correct, of the three of them. He is the Midah. If Avram is Chesed and Yaakov is Tiferes, Yitzchak's Midah is Gvura. What's Gvura? Where do you see strength by Yitzchak? Akeda, yeah. He did not flinch. He didn't miss a beat. Hashem, Avram told him, will show us for the sheep for the Akeda. You're going to be the sheep for the Akeda. He tells Yitzchak, he says, oh great, I'm there. Not even a hesitation. I'm purely for Hashem. He is that silent devotion. Whatever Hashem says is always good. The model of bitachon. That's Gvura. He also, what did he do when the Plishtim started up with him and started messing around and warring over the three wells which symbolized the three Batei Mikdash that would eventually be built? What was his reaction? He did not. That's the point. He did not fight back. What was his Gvura? He packed up and moved away. Where's godless and packing up? You're a wimp. You don't fight the guy. Stare him down. No, what's this? Right? So what do we say? That's Gvura. Gvura is surviving quietly. When the Biryonim, when the fanatics at the end of the Second Temple period came and wanted to make a fight with the Romans, all the Gedolim at the head of them, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, don't fight, we're going to lose this one. We fight by serving Hashem, by keeping Torah and mitzvos. That's how we fight. We fight by being strong spiritually. That's the Yitzchak's Gvura. And then we just said now Rav Shach used the same idea and the idea I mentioned on the bus earlier, where he said we don't fight straight one-on-one settlements and wars. That's not how we're going to bring Mashiach. We fight the Yitzchak style of battle, which is silent strength, which was immense, and we don't hear him speaking too much, but his power is imminent. Rivka Imenu. What do you think when you think of Rivka? What's that? True. She only had 2 twins, and were they ever different? Right? What did she do when they were running around in her belly? She went to go inquire to Hashem. She like all the Nevios all of the Imaos had Nevuah. Sarah is singled out in the Brisa in Megillah, but she had Nevuah as well. And she went to seek Hashem, and Hashem comforted her and calmed her. Rivka Imenu is also that silent sense. She was, according to one calculation, how old when she met Eliezer by the well? 3. Some say 14. So 3. Okay, forget the age. That's already requires some explanation. But she grew up in the house of Besua. Her brother was Lavan. Rishaim were Shaim. These are not role models. How did she know not just to be a Balas Chesed? Do you know how many tons of water she slept that day for Eliezer and his 1,000 camels? You know how much camels drink after a long journey? Right? And she was happy, going, running, doing the whole thing. Where'd she get that from? Rabbi Victor Miller says she heard the stories of Avraham Avinu and inspired her. Like we're hearing the stories of these Gedolim. Don't underestimate the power of your own acts and how they can inspire other people and move them to totally change their lives. She just heard the stories of Avraham Avinu and she rose to it. Rivka was the mover and shaker in that family. Any question, go look up Parshas Toldos. Right? She called the shots and she was right. Even though Yitzchak loved Esav, but many fault him for that, some defend him for that. He was actually trying to makarav Esav, according to one view. But Rivka knew she loved Yaakov and she defended Yaakov. She knew that he would have to be the one, the Bechir HaAvos, the select of the forefathers who would sustain Hashem's people and carry to the next stage. Let's go to see Yaakov and Leah.
How did this guy get on the bus? Yo, Bittul Torah, bro.